I don't have to prove I'm right. I know what my truth is, and sharing it with her doesn't make any difference, but I have to live it. And I went to Al-Anon to figure out how to do that, how to let go of believing that if I could just say the right thing, I could stop an alcoholic from drinking, save my marriage, and save my family. So I have been in Al-Anon ever since, and it just gets better the longer I stay.
Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery, where I help people heal their emotional, psychological, and spiritual wounds and make deep, lasting changes in their lives. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I'm a boundaries coach who specializes in helping women who are focused on what others are thinking and doing and neglect themselves in the process. And I have coached hundreds of people on how to build healthy boundaries using my exclusive Build framework. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any particular 12-step fellowship. I also don't believe that 12-step recovery is the only way to recover. You might need additional help. I'm an avid beachcomber who collects sea glass, shells, wood, and stones. I am a formerly closeted fan of the Hallmark Channel, especially the Christmas movies. Hello, Christmas in July. I wear fingerless gloves from September to June because my hands are always cold, so I have about 15 pairs. And I get a huge kick out of counting how many days, weeks, and months there are until my birthday or Christmas at completely random times of the year. My hope is that you'll find my words concretely helpful in improving your life, whether you're in recovery or not. If you like what you've heard on this episode, please screenshot it and share it on your social media and tag me at Higher Power Coaching. This is episode 280. This is a guest episode with Laurel, and it's called Living My Truth. I invited Laurel here today because I heard her on the recovery show, and I was like, wow, I need to have that woman on my podcast. I just love the way that she talked about her recovery. And speaking of the recovery show, I know that there are a number of people who listen to my podcast because they heard me on that podcast. And in fact, I've gotten quite a number of clients. So shout out to all of the recovery show fans, and especially to Spencer. I did actually message him recently asking him if he would be a guest on my show, but I haven't heard back from him yet. So hopefully he will. But anyway, I really loved what Laurel had to share. And I think the thing that really struck me the most was the talk about gossip, because that was a huge problem for me. And I was shocked to learn that I gossiped. I didn't know that talking negatively about my boss behind her back for 19 years was gossip, which is hilarious because that's sort of like the definition of gossip, that you repeatedly talk about somebody behind their back. But it has to do with the fact that I grew up in a dysfunctional family and we had dysfunctional communication patterns. And so that was my imprint. Learning to stop gossiping was just monumental and very difficult. But the way I think of it is that I knocked down the domino of gossip. It was like it knocked down a bunch of other defects of character of mine because all of them were so connected. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Laurel, and she's going to share her experience, strength, and hope from recovery. Take it away, Laurel.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to share my story. So I was married to an alcoholic for 14 years, and I knew she was an alcoholic when we married. She had been sober for 6 years at that point, and she told me she would never drink again. She also told me I wouldn't have liked her when she was drinking, and turns out she was absolutely right about that. I did not like her when she started drinking again.
Shocker.
And about 6 years into our marriage, she decided she thought she could drink normally, which I now understand with exposure to 12-step programs is the great fantasy of every alcoholic, that someday they will be able to drink like other people. And so she said, I'm going to try drinking again. And I was like, that's a terrible idea, but it's really hard to stay married to someone if you say you don't trust them. It was a pretty impossible situation. Not that I think if I'd said no, she wouldn't have. it wasn't really that she was asking my permission. She was telling me what she was going to do. But in any case, she started drinking. And about 3 years later, it had gotten to the point that it was really a problem. We had two little kids, two little boys, who were at that point 2 and 6. And I started to say, like, this is not okay. This is not working. You need to stop. And she would just be mean in response and deflect. It came to a head in late 2018, and her brother intervened. And I see now this pattern where when she knows her drinking's out of control, she'll wait until her brother's coming in from out of town. And then she'll kind of stage a scene at a family party where she gets so drunk that he has to intervene. And she kind of remakes the original intervention that happened in her 20s. And he says she has to stop drinking, and then she goes and does it, right? But of course, as her spouse, it feels pretty shitty that like nothing I said got through.
Mm-hmm.
But, here comes brother. Okay, now I'll take it seriously. And after that, there was this sort of quit drinking for a while, relapse, hide the relapse, drink in secret, fail to hide it effectively because you're drinking so much, confrontation. People have been there. They know what that looks like. So ultimately, by the summer of 2021, we'd been through 3 or 4 cycles of that relapse. And I was so tired of the attacks that came if I confronted her that I just sent her an email. I was like, your brother called because he thinks you're drinking because you sounded drunk the last time he talked to you. I also know you're drinking. I don't want to fight about it. And she wrote me back and said, his concern is noted but unnecessary. As if I could go screw, and his concern was noted but unnecessary. And then 12 days later, she got in a car drunk with our 2 children and drove them across town.
Wow.
And she was going to a family party where her brother was going to be. He was there from out of town. It was her mother's birthday. And I was actually not staying for the whole party. It was part of a boundary that I was setting with her family. And so I was following her, and I was about 20, 30 minutes behind her. And when I got there, her brother came to me at the door and said, Carolyn's drunk. She's been slurring her words since she got here. And that was how I knew that she had driven drunk with the kids. So she's just like verbally abusive, falling down, embarrassing. Everybody knows what's happening. No one's saying it. And finally, she's like, okay, boys, it's time to go. And she pops up like she's going to get in the car and drive them home. And I was like, no. So I rushed up, grabbed the boys. I don't even think they put their shoes or their coats on. I'm just like, grab your shoes and your coats. We're walking through the snow to the car. We're getting in the car. We're leaving. And it was very traumatic. I was very upset. And I was so angry because I'm thinking, I just emailed you that this was a problem. Why haven't you stopped it?
The email's going to do it.
Right. As if addiction can be solved with clear communication. But that sense of needing to be in control of it because I needed to protect my kids, I think really defined the sort of fundamental tension of my recovery, right? Which is that step one is I'm powerless over alcohol and alcoholics, but also I'm a mom with tiny children. And I'm apparently the only person in the world who understands that she's a threat to them. So it's really been hard to deal with that. And I've recently found some peace around it that I will share, but it has been hard won. The story of living my truth happens in the 2 weeks after that when I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I called the Al-Anon number, somebody called me back. And actually, the funny part is, I asked her after that night, why did you do this? Like, why would you do this? Like every family member ever has done. And she said, go to Al-Anon, they'll tell you. So I went to Al-Anon because my alcoholic told me to. And in Al-Anon, I did not find any real answers or ways to necessarily stop her or protect my kids. But I did find out that the reason she drank was because she was an alcoholic. And there was no other reason. There didn't need to be another reason. So, in that couple of weeks when I was in real serious crisis, I went to a meeting on Zoom because this was during the pandemic. And I started saying the serenity prayer at night when I couldn't sleep. And one night, I was trying to save my marriage. I had not at all decided that I did not want to try and save my marriage because to me that was saving my family. And this was a person I had loved for a long time. And I knew that divorce would be financially catastrophic, especially for my kids. So these are all my worries, right? So I just start saying the serenity prayer over and over and over again until I could fall asleep because I wasn't sleeping at all. And I woke up in the morning and it was like I just got this message, which was live your truth, right? And I was saying the serenity prayer to drown out all of the arguments in my head. Little squirrels running around up there. If I could just find the right words, I'll convince her, right? It's like the magic email. If I could just find the right words, I'll convince her that this is her problem and she's got to solve it. Meanwhile, she's telling me it's my fault and all the reasons it's my fault and all the things that alcoholics do. So I wrote down live your truth. And what I understood it to mean at the time was you don't need to win any arguments with her. There is no winning arguments with her. She's not doing this because she needs to be. She's not in control of it. We're powerless over alcohol and alcoholics. So I don't have to prove I'm right. I know what my truth is, and sharing it with her doesn't make any difference, but I have to live it. And I went to Al-Anon to figure out how to do that, how to let go of believing that if I could just say the right thing, I could stop an alcoholic from drinking, save my marriage, and save my family. So I have been in Al-Anon ever since, and it just gets better the longer I stay. In that first year, we negotiated a separation agreement. And in that separation agreement, I gave up a lot of things in order to get one thing that I believed would keep my kids safe. And that was daily sobriety testing using a service called SoberLink. And my lawyer wrote it into the separation agreement that she would test using SoberLink 2 random times a day, every day during parenting time until my youngest son was 18. That's until 2033.
Nice.
And she signed it. However, earlier this year, she told me that her girlfriend was moving in. And when we met to talk about what effect that would have on the boys, a whole bunch of red flags happened. Like they hadn't talked about money. This person doesn't want to co-parent. Need to give you the details, just concerns. So I contacted the person who was supposed to be getting the SoberLink results because I knew enough from Al-Anon that that person couldn't be me. I did not want to be in charge of her daily sobriety testing results. I didn't want to think about her sobriety every day because it was unhealthy for me to do that. So I contacted the priest who was in charge of getting those results, and I heard nothing. And I get this nasty email from Carolyn informing me, my ex-wife, that she had stopped testing after a year and not told them. And neither had the priest. And if I wanted her to keep testing, I would have to pay for it. And she had not asked to recalculate child support. And so therefore that made all of this okay. Because somehow that made me equally in violation of the separation agreement. Like the alcoholic thinking here was wild. And I went into a trauma response. I absolutely lost my mind. I was in tears. My body reacted. My heart beat faster. I couldn't sleep again. And I knew what to do, right? Which was to go to meetings. Like, how could I believe her? Why did I think I could trust an alcoholic? What an idiot, right? How could I have trusted her again in a way that might have put my kids at risk? Never heard from the priest. I assume that she told the priest she only had to test for a year. She had led me to believe that the priest had understood what was in the agreement and that it was longer than a year, but no one's ever confirmed that for me. In any case, I'm sitting there going, I can't believe this. But a part of me was thinking, but you know what step one says, which is that you're powerless over alcohol and alcoholics. So I call my lawyer, and my lawyer tells me that basically this sucks and it was legal because she signed it, but it's not actually enforceable in court. And this is the warning to every parent out there. that what family courts will enforce around alcoholism is shockingly meager. A family court judge is likely to require you to test for a year, maybe 3 if you've actually hurt someone. And in the absence of evidence that she was actually drinking or drinking and driving with my kids, there wasn't anything I could do. I'd go to court and lose. I could go to court and ask for more custody, and I probably wouldn't get it. So I'm sitting there going, I spent thousands of dollars to get a separation agreement I can't enforce in court that an alcoholic can undo in a day. What am I supposed to do now? Right? So I'm angry at her. I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at the priest. I'm angry at the courts. Like, I'm back in my anger, right? And I'm in that trauma response every time I talk about it. And I just can't move past it. I can't figure out how to keep my kids safe and also live under step 1. What is the answer here? So I put it in my God box. I wrote down keeping my kids safe, and I wrote down something else which came out of reading Al-Anon literature, which was like, help me to remember that it is not my job alone to keep them safe, that it's also your job, higher power, and that I can't save them from every hurt in the world. I just have to be here to help them be resilient and figure out how to live their own truth. It's been about 4 months since I found out she wasn't testing. She sent me a new letter from a new lawyer asking for a new separation agreement because she wants one that actually reflects what we're doing. Basically, she doesn't want one hanging out there that says she should be doing something she's not doing because she probably can't live with the daily guilt of that. We're in this kind of renegotiation and we're really at a standstill. You know, she says, I'll do hair follicle testing. Then you'll know I've been sober for the last 90 days. And my response is, you've been sober for 90 days many times. You've been sober for longer than 90 days many times. That doesn't tell me shit about whether or not our kids are safe today.
Mm.
And I'm so focused on making sure she can't do it again. And I just can't get past it. And I'm also, if we're being honest, really mad. And I can't believe that she gets to do this. She gets to violate this agreement and there's no repercussion. She just gets a new agreement that suits her better. I'm angry about that and it's making me stubborn. But I've done my steps 4s and 5s and 6s, and I'm meditating every day and asking God to remove my anger and resentment, which are 2 of my key, along with gossip and people pleasing and trying to love people with chronic shame into not having chronic shame anymore. Those are my big character defects. And in the midst of what has been a crazy week, like I ended a romantic relationship this week and it was hard, but I used my Al-Anon tools and actually it was amazing how much detachment was like a muscle I could flex, right? At this point, because I've practiced it so much. But in the middle of that, I was talking to a dear friend who came into Al-Anon about the same time as me. And I'm telling her about this breakup and all my reasons and whatever. And she says, hey, I don't know why this is not about that at all, but I feel like I'm supposed to ask you this question right now. So don't take it the wrong way. And she says, you know, when you talk about the separation agreement, there's a difference between her drinking and her drinking around your kids. And there's a difference between her drinking and driving and drinking and driving with your kids. So what do you really need? What do you really need? And I went, God, you're right. I know what this looks like. She's not going to pick up a drink tomorrow and be drinking and driving with the kids the next day. It takes months for this disease to progress to that point. And I don't have any evidence that she's drinking now. And I don't think she is really. I think she doesn't want to test every day because it makes her come in contact with her shame every time she has to pick that thing up and test.
Mm.
So I can't, unfortunately, make her go deal with her shame, right? But I can recognize that we're at an impasse and that there might be a way for me to feel like I'm doing what I can to keep my kids safe without insisting on daily testing. So I said to her, you're right. If I asked her to just do a urine test or a hair follicle test 2 random times a year, roughly 6 months apart, would probably be enough to catch it before it got to the point where she was compulsively drinking so much that she was no longer really in control. Now, maybe I'm fooling myself, right? Like, this is a
Hmm.
progressive disease. It happens. They say when people relapse, they relapse much faster.
Hmm. I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get anything better. And I can't go, even if I wanted to spend 30 grand and go to court, I'm not going to get more in court.
Yeah.
So maybe she'll agree to that. Maybe 2 times a year, a random test is the best I can get. And it still expresses to a court through a legal document that I have a concern that I'm taking seriously. The other thing that I can do that I've already done, that I did as soon as I found out she wasn't testing, is talk to my kids, educate my kids. I don't talk to them about her. I just say, hey, what do you know about addiction? What do you know about alcohol and drugs? What would you do if you thought somebody was too drunk or high to drive and they wanted you to get in a car with them? Let's say it's a friend or a family member. What could you do in that instance? And we made a safety plan.
I love this. This is principles before personalities. This is a perfect illustration of that
Yeah,
because you're
yeah,
not
yeah.
talking to them about their mom. You're talking about in general, which is good and important.
Exactly. This is a conversation every parent should be having with their kids, right?
Absolutely.
So you say you don't feel well, you take your phone to the bathroom, you call me, and you come back and say, I'm really not feeling good, so I called mama and she's going to come get me. Then you don't have to confront anybody. You don't have to do anything. If you want to tell them you just barf and you might barf on them, just want to get them out of your way, that's what you do. And if you can't reach me, here's other people in your phone you can reach. So that they have a sort of escape plan and a safety plan. They have access to phones they can use. And we're having these conversations as they get older more and more explicitly about addiction and what it looks like. My younger son's adopted and his birth parents were both addicts. So it's an ongoing conversation in our family. It's nothing new. And there's more than one person it could be about. I've also taken them to Alateen and to Al-Anon days. I'm an Alateen MIS, as they say, an Al-Anon member in Alateen service. They hate it. They don't want to go.
Of course, this is what I hear all the time, but then it sinks in
But at some
eventually.
point, yeah, they might want it to be there. And it's
Hmm.
actually been tremendously helpful for me to
Mm.
be there. Amazing things have happened. In Alateen meetings, I've had childhood memories surface that helped me to work through some of my feelings about my parents. And I also, it was funny when I started as an MIS, I kept forgetting to go. I would like set alarms on my phone and I would forget to go places. Like I'm extremely punctual and organized. But like alarms would go off and I'd silence them and I'd forget to go. 3 weeks in a row this happened. And finally I said, I'm having a trauma response. I'm afraid to go because I'm afraid it will make me so upset and sad. Because my kids are at the center of all of my anger and resentment
Yeah.
about the drinking for, I guess, obvious reasons, right? So finally, my best friend drove me. I was like, I need you to drive me on Sunday night. I can't be trusted to get there.
Yeah. Well, asking
And
for help,
then,
that's
yeah.
beautiful.
And
Yeah.
then once I
Yeah.
did that, I was fine. I haven't forgotten again. But I was afraid of, I think, what I would find there. So I haven't asked yet for a 2 times a year random test, but
Hmm.
I'm at peace with the idea of it. And with the idea of saying, I'll even pay for it, because this is really important to her. She's always wanted me to pay for this sobriety testing. Like it's my problem and not hers. I'm like, no, this is how you prove you're safe to parent, not my problem. I can solve that by just having them all the time. Give me 90% custody and we can stop talking about this. But I'm ready to offer, right? Like just my friend asking me that and telling me, look, you're having a trauma response to this. You're
Hmm.
not thinking reasonably. You need to reason this out and think about what you can really have in the context of this world where this is a legal document. No, you can't trust her, but the court doesn't care.
Well, it sounds like you're learning to live life on life's terms
Yeah.
and that you're learning to accept things that you really want them to be unacceptable, but you're learning to accept them. So in the last few minutes, I'd love to hear maybe some of like the top three most important things from recovery that have helped you manage, especially this current situation that's going on.
Yeah, it was a huge week. I think boundaries, I don't have to tell you how important boundaries are,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Having good boundaries, understanding what's my business and what's not my business, so important. And realizing that detaching from other people's reactions to my boundaries was healthy. Because people have terrible reactions to boundaries. That's what just happened at the end of this relationship. I was dating someone and I laid down some boundaries, and her response was just like, bulldoze through them, ignore them, dismiss them, argue about them. And then it was emotional manipulation. And I was like, okay, I think we're done now. And I didn't feel all upset about it. It was just like, these are the boundaries I need to protect my serenity. I know very clearly what they are. I will not accept unacceptable behavior anymore. These are my rules, and you can either respect them or bye. Like, I'm not doing this again. I have been there and done that. And the boundary also of, I know you want my help with that problem, but that's yours to fix, not mine. I can't do that for you. And if I stay in this relationship because you want my help, then I'm just your parent. We're not partners at that point. I don't want any part of that. The other one I would say is learning to shut up.
So zip it. That was definitely one of my best interventions in the year.
Yeah.
Just shut the fuck up. Yeah.
Learning to shut up, learning that winning an argument didn't actually make a difference, right? Like, I can talk circles around people. My lawyer said to me the other day, she's like, well, you have no problem expressing your point of view. That's like, oh, no. I can win any argument with logic and reason and evidence, but that doesn't mean that the other person's going to behave differently. They can say whatever they want in the moment and then go back to doing what they were doing the next day. It doesn't make any difference. The magic email didn't stop the drunk driving.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't really a magic email.
No, exactly, right?
Because if it was magic, maybe it would have stopped it. But there's no such
Right?
thing as a magic email.
Man, if there was, if only there was, right? But I
Mm,
basically like, be quiet and listen and stop trying to win the argument. I don't have to prove I'm right. I can live my truth just with myself in my house.
hmm
That's in
hmm
the dog and my serenity. I do not need anyone else's approval or support to do that. What I need is the 12 steps, going to meetings and talking to my sponsor. I have a wonderful sponsor. We meet for an hour every week and we read literature and share on it. We read through the steps. Right now, we're doing this cool thing with Reaching for Personal Freedom where we're reading each step, tradition, and concept together,
Oh, nice.
talking about them together and how they kind of relate to each other. And so those are the things that help me and that keep me from going back into my trauma responses, going back into my anger and resentment, because they remind me that those things are kind of pointless. It's sort of like if I think about gossip, right? Like, you want to call people up and talk about this terrible thing that so and so did. This, can you believe my alcoholic stopped testing and didn't tell me? But what good does that do me?
Well, it activates your nervous system, for one thing.
Right.
It creates chaos in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just going to rob me of my sleep and my serenity. And
hmm
it's not useful. So I think, boundaries, detachment, and shutting my mouth. And at first, I could just shut my mouth, my brain would still go. Now I've learned to say to my brain, I know you're doing the thing you do, which is to try and solve problems. But this is not a problem that is yours to solve. This is someone else's problem over which you have no power. Step one. So please stop trying to solve this unsolvable problem and let me go to sleep.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
Have that little talk with my brain, and it actually
Mm,
works.
yeah. Yeah. I hand that stuff over to God. When I first came in, my feelings and my thoughts were the primary things I was handing. And actually, I didn't hand them over, I shoved them. I was like, seriously, God, you have
Please
to
take
take
these away
this.
from me. I hate them. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you would have loved to share and didn't get a chance to before we end the call?
Something interesting happened. The same friends who challenged me on testing to make me think about what I really can have and what I really need. We went out to lunch about 2 weeks ago, and we've been in program almost the same amount of time, about 2.5 years. And at that lunch, we both said, "So I have this childhood memory that surfaced. I've come out of denial about something, and it's really powerful." And I was like, huh, isn't that funny that into our second year in Al-Anon, we're both in this place where that's happening. And I said that to another person who's been in program for over a decade, and she said, "Oh yeah, it's the second year thing. It happens. Like you get through the first stages of crisis or denial, and then if you keep doing the work, those things start coming out at you. There are whole other layers of denial and things that you have not been able to deal with that start showing up." And I just thought that was really interesting. So for people out there who think like, we come to this meeting and it's the same 12 steps and this is so boring and what's the point, right? Because I remember about 6 months into program, I was like, I can't believe we have to read all this stuff over and over again every time. We know what it says, right? And now I understand that like it's a ritual that calms my body and my nervous system, that separates that meeting from the rest of the world, that gets me ready to be in that space and to think about myself differently and my relationship to my higher power and other people, right? But if you've been in program for a minute and you think you got it all, you have no idea how much better it will get if you just keep going. And
Yeah.
you know what? If you don't like this meeting, go to a different one. If you don't like that meeting, go to a different one. If that person's not working out as a sponsor, talk to another friend, start a step study, get a different book. Like my first year in Al-Anon, I bought myself every single piece of literature in print that I could order from the beach for Christmas, all of it. But that was my Christmas gift to myself. And having that library on hand is huge.
That's fantastic. So I want to say something about the denial. So I'm in ACA is my main program. I'm also in OA, and a huge part of recovering from intergenerational family dysfunction is coming out of denial. And I think I have 5 or 6 episodes of my podcast about denial. And that's because every time a new layer comes off,
Mhm.
then I do an episode about it. And it's just part of it. And I think what I hear a lot of people say is like they're afraid to have the memories. And I'm like, you know what? Your psyche is not going to allow you to remember things that you cannot handle. It's a built in protective mechanism. And so, I think that's really interesting that you guys have made that observation at the 2 year mark. This is what happens. And I do reparenting. And a little over a year and a half ago, I like really kind of stepped that up and started making conscious contact very regularly with my inner child and all that. And it's changed everything. And there's been more layers, way more layers that I was shocked after.
Wow.
At that point, it was 8 years in recovery, that were coming up. And so I think, this is part of the work. And the other thing about like reading the literature over and over again, you're a different person every time you read it. And sometimes you read something and it's like, what happens to me is I'll be like, that sounds like news. And then I look and I've notes in 3 different colors. Like clearly I've read this at least 3 times, but it feels like news to me
Mhm.
because there's just so much to learn. And the recovery, it's like any like really good, deep personal development literature. There's layers and layers and layers and layers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Laurel. I really appreciate you sharing the details of your story and your commitment to recovery and for sharing with my audience. Thank you, everybody, so much. And because you talked about the shame of your former partner, if anybody's listening to this and haven't, my last 2 episodes before this are about
Mm.
shame and blame, actually, because we often blame other people because we're trying to displace our shame. So you can go back and listen to those. But anyway,
That
thank you so
sounds.
much, Laurel.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're feeling overwhelmed because you're overcommitted and just can't keep up. You neglect yourself even though you know you should take better care of yourself, but you just don't have the time. You really want to say no, but just can't get yourself to do it because you don't want to come across as selfish or unhelpful. And you're pretending things are okay with you when they're really not. If this is you, we should talk. Go to barbchat.net and sign up for a free 30-minute call with me about my private coaching. This is for people who are finally ready to make deep, lasting changes in their lives, their relationship patterns, including their relationships with themselves, their partners, family, friends, and colleagues. That's barbchat.net. If you like this podcast, and I'm guessing you did because you're still listening, you will also love my weekly newsletter, Friday Fragments, which has short essays similar to the podcast. You can check it out at fridayfragments.news. That's fridayfragments.news. If you haven't already subscribed to my podcast on your favorite podcast outlet, please do that. It helps carry the message to more people. I started this podcast because there was so much wisdom in recovery that just wasn't making its way out into the world. So I want as many people as possible to hear it. I'd also love it if you'd leave a 5-star rating or a review, which you can do on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find it so they can get the benefits that you've gotten from listening. If someone in particular came to mind when you listen to this episode, please share it with them. And my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. Please DM me there. I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. I run private and group coaching programs on building healthy boundaries. Whether you need help with boundaries in your personal, professional, or romantic life, I can help. Head on over to barbchat.net where you can get on my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. I also do short-term situational coaching to help people make it through specific situations they're going through, such as divorce, empty nesting, preparing for retirement, or any phase where their identity is shifting. Regardless of the type of coaching, my ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, I'd love to work with you. My goal with all my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.